In the winter of 1940, with the British Army having just evacuated from Dunkirk, leaving behind almost every piece of heavy equipment it possessed, with the country genuinely contemplating the possibility of a German invasion that nobody was confident they could stop, and with the entire British defence establishment scrambling to find weapons from any source that would accept payment in any currency, a senior British officer sat down and wrote a purchasing order for 50,000 Thompson submachine guns from the United States, at a price that in retrospect seems almost reasonable given the desperation of the circumstances. The Thompson was at that point primarily famous for two things: being the weapon of choice for American organized crime during the Prohibition era, and being extraordinarily expensive compared to every other submachine gun on the market. Neither of these facts discouraged the British in the slightest, because when your alternative is defending the coast with bolt-action rifles and sheer stubbornness, a gangster gun is significantly better than nothing. What the British officer who signed that order probably did not anticipate was that more than 4 years later, after the army had developed cheaper and lighter alternatives, after the entire logic of the Thompson's expense and weight had been rendered obsolete by simpler weapons that could be stamped out of sheet metal in a fraction of the time and at a fraction of the cost, the most elite fighting units in the British military would still be choosing the Thompson over everything the army was offering them, hiding their Thompsons from inspecting officers, quietly acquiring more through unofficial channels, and in at least one documented case, literally refusing a direct order to hand them in because the men concerned had calculated with considerable accuracy that their lives were more likely to depend on their Thompson than on following the instruction. To understand why this happened, you need to understand what the Thompson actually was, which requires setting aside everything you think you know about it from gangster movies and World War II films. Because the popular image of the Thompson as a crude, heavy weapon, beloved primarily by criminals and cinematic heroes, bears almost no relationship to the technical reality of what made the gun genuinely remarkable, and why soldiers who had used it in combat were so reluctant to give it up. John Taliaferro Thompson was a United States Army general who had spent decades thinking about infantry firepower and had arrived at a conclusion that was not widely shared in the military establishment of his era, which was that the individual soldier was dramatically underarmed compared to what technology could provide, and that a weapon capable of delivering automatic fire in a compact package would transform small unit tactics in a way that standard-issue rifles simply could not match. He began development in 1917 with the specific intention of creating what he called a trench broom, a weapon that could clear enemy soldiers out of confined spaces with overwhelming close-range firepower, and the design that emerged was built around the .45 ACP cartridge, a large and heavy pistol round that delivered enormous stopping power at the close ranges where automatic fire was most useful, and a mechanism of unusual quality and precision that gave the Thompson a reliability record in adverse conditions that competitors consistently failed to match. The weapon that went into production was heavy, there is no point pretending otherwise, with the M1928 version weighing around 10.5 pounds empty and becoming considerably heavier when loaded with the 50-round drum magazine that became its most iconic accessory. It was expensive, requiring machined components and careful assembly that drove costs far above what military procurement officers considered acceptable for a weapon issued to ordinary infantry. And it was, by any objective measure, significantly more gun than most military situations required, because the scenario Thompson had designed it for, the close-quarters nightmare of trench warfare, had given way to a different kind of conflict where engagement distances were often longer and the specific advantages of the Thompson were less consistently relevant. None of this mattered to the British Commandos. The Commandos were formed in 1940 as a direct response to the fall of France, created by Winston Churchill, with the specific brief of taking the war back to the Germans through raids, sabotage, and the kind of aggressive small unit action that conventional military formations were too large and too slow to conduct. From the very beginning, the commando selection process filtered for a particular kind of soldier, one who was not merely physically capable, but who possessed a specific combination of independence, aggression, and tactical intelligence that made them genuinely dangerous in situations where standard military training produced hesitation rather than action. These were not men who followed procedures because they had been told to. They followed procedures that worked and discarded procedures that didn't, and this approach extended with complete consistency to their choice of weapons. When Commandos began receiving Thompsons in 1940 and 1941, the response from the men who used them in actual operations was immediate and unambiguous. The weight was real, but it was acceptable. The reliability was extraordinary, and it was irreplaceable. In the kind of close-quarters fighting that commando raids inevitably produced, in the corridors of German installations and the narrow streets of occupied European towns and the cramped spaces of enemy vessels boarded at night, the Thompson's combination of firepower, stopping power, and absolute mechanical dependability made it the weapons soldiers trusted their lives to in a way that created an attachment that no amount of logistical argument was going to dislodge. The Army's position was not unreasonable from a supply chain perspective. The Sten gun, introduced in 1941, could be manufactured for approximately 1/10 the cost of a Thompson, weighed significantly less, and used the same 9mm ammunition as the German weapons commandos, frequently captured and needed to use. From a procurement standpoint, the case for standardizing on the Sten was overwhelming, and instructions went out that Thompson submachine guns were to be turned in and replaced with the new weapon. A process that proceeded smoothly across most of the British Army and ground to a complete halt the moment it encountered men who had used both weapons in combat and had formed a clear opinion about which one they were willing to bet their lives on. The Sten's reputation among soldiers who used it in action was, to put it diplomatically, complicated. The weapon was simple to manufacture precisely because it was simple in its design, and that simplicity created failure modes that Thompson users found difficult to accept. The Sten was prone to accidental discharge when dropped or bumped, a characteristic that caused casualties among friendly forces, with a frequency that became a genuine operational concern. Its magazine was temperamental, and its mechanism lacked the robust precision that made the Thompson so consistent under the kind of conditions that field use inevitably produced. Commandos who had carried Thompsons into raids and come home alive looked at the Sten, understood what they were being asked to exchange, and declined with a directness that their training had made entirely natural. What followed was a quiet institutional standoff that lasted through the middle years of the war, with supply officers periodically attempting to enforce standardization and commando units periodically producing reasons why their specific operational requirements made the Thompson irreplaceable, reasons that were not entirely fabricated because there were genuine tactical contexts where the Thompson's characteristics were genuinely superior, and experienced soldiers knew the difference. Weapons moved through unofficial channels. Inspections were anticipated and prepared for. The Thompson persisted in commando hands through North Africa, through Italy, through the raids on the Norwegian coast, and the operations in the Aegean and the infiltrations into occupied France that preceded and followed the invasion of Normandy. By the time the war ended, the Thompson had been largely replaced in most British units by weapons that were cheaper, lighter, and easier to supply, and the Army had won the logistical argument it had been making since 1941. But the Commandos, who carried Thompsons through the hardest fighting of the war, knew something that the procurement tables didn't capture, which was the specific feeling of absolute confidence in a weapon that had never let them down, in the moments when letting them down would have been fatal. The Thompson was heavy and expensive and obsolete by almost every metric that military planners use to evaluate weapons, and the men who refused to give it up were right, and the men who wanted to take it away from them were also right. And the difference between those two positions was the difference between fighting a war on paper and fighting it in the dark against people who wanted to kill you. The gangster gun ended up in the hands of the best soldiers Britain produced in the Second World War, and they kept it because it deserved to be kept. And that is a more honest tribute to John Thompson's engineering than anything written on a certificate or displayed in a museum.